Okay, the story that Lisa told at the end there was tremendous and fantastic, and I think it really helps to illustrate the power of storytelling and how important it is to all of us as leaders and as humans. And so what we're going to do next is something a little new and a little different for LX and for conferences in general. We're going to have someone come up on the stage for a short period of time. They're going to come up 4 times throughout the conference and help us understand how to tell powerful stories and the importance of storytelling. So Christina Wodtke is an author, a speaker, a teacher here in the Bay Area. She's got deep insight into human innovation and high-performing teams. Her resume reads like a who's who of Bay Area companies, LinkedIn, MySpace, Cigna, Yahoo, as well as many others. She's founded 3 startups. She's written a book. She's founded an online design magazine called Boxes and Arrows, which many of you are probably familiar with. She co-founded the Information Architecture Institute. And she's up for a new challenge, and that's why she's agreed to do this scary new thing and share the importance of storytelling with us. So please help me welcome, for part 1, or chapter 1 of this, please help me welcome my friend Christina to the stage. Christina Wodtke.
Hello, all. I have an 11-year-old daughter, and do you know what the most common words in our household are? Alexa, play the Hamilton soundtrack. You know, she loves it so much. And yeah, she loves the music, which is incredible, but what she really loves are the stories. So her entire class have decided that they're going to put on this play. I don't know how they're going to pull it off, but they love the stories. And she comes up to me and she goes, "Do you know what happened to Liza? Oh my God, her son got in a duel. You know what happened to Aaron Burr? They were friends." I mean, this is what she loves. She loves these stories. And these stories are fundamental to who we are. Now, science has a problem. I believe there was a march yesterday. And science is really struggling. And they realized this a while ago. They realized they were having a hard time getting to people. And if you remember the vaccination problem, some guy made up data, literally made up data, and got whatever it is for doctors when they get disbarred, got thrown out for making up the data about the story that vaccinations cause autism. But the story was too powerful. The scientists couldn't fight it. And when this happened, they realized we've got to learn how to tell stories. And we've seen the rise of storytelling in science. We have Atul Gawande, the doctor. We have Malcolm Gladwell. Scientists sort of think he might be too good a storyteller and not enough of a scientist. But I think it's time for designers to realize that we've got to stop arguing with facts. And it's time to tell some stories. And I want to begin with a little story of my own. So it's 1993, 94. And I am waiting tables and working on my master's in creative writing. And I am dirt poor. I'm living in a 1-building slum on Nob Hill. And I'm not joking about this. One day I had to call in sick because the clawfoot bathtub fell through the floor, through the rotted floor. And I'm tired and I'm weary, but I'm writing this really important American novel for my thesis. Except it was boring. Nothing ever happened. It was a story of a bunch of slackers who sat around with bathtubs that fell through the floor. So I got a phone call from a friend of my boyfriend, and he said, "Hey, we're building a Yahoo killer over at CNET. You want to join?" And I happily abandoned my incredibly boring novel and left, never looked back. So e-greetings, Yahoo, LinkedIn, some stuff that Richard talked about later, left Zynga, and I was really blown away by OKRs. It's a goal-setting technique, and I wanted to write a book about it. I'm writing a book about a business technique with an acronym. That's going to be boring. But I wanted people to read it, strangely enough. If you write a book, you want it to be read. So I decided I should figure out this, plot, story, thingy-bopper. And being the child from a long line of librarians, I did what we all do, which is literature review. Yeah. I read books by playwrights. I read books by comic book scriptwriters. Yes, there are more than one book that will teach you how to write a script about a comic book. I read books by literature authors, romance authors, like everything. And I started to see a pattern. It was kind of a wave shape, a little bigger than Freytag's triangle. And I got really excited. Have I cracked plot? And then I came across a talk by a guy named Kendall Haven. And Kendall Haven was an ex-scientist turned professional storyteller. I'd love to know how they make their money. But he was a professional storyteller and does Red Fests and children's things. And he got a DARPA grant to study storytelling. And if you get a DARPA grant, you get to do all the toys. You put people through an MRI. You actually get to do dopamine swabs. Dopamine is the happy juice your body makes when it's happy. He got to do it all. And he found that there were elements of a story that made people happy, excited, and interested. And the graphs overlapped. It turns out that what everybody knows, which is what science knows, which is there is a secret to story. I want to share that secret with story to you right now. Element 1, we need a character with a goal and a motivation. The goal can be just about anything. It's kind of a MacGuffin. For example, in Harry Potter, he wants to get rid of Voldemort because, who doesn't have an evil stalker, evil sorcerer after us? We can all relate to that. Okay, maybe we can't relate to that, but what we can relate to is here is a kid who's been basically stored under the stairs by his relatives who finally found a home. And home we relate to, family we relate to. For a lot of you being here at this conference, some of you are going to say, I found my tribe. Harry finds his tribe when he gets to Hogwarts. So he wants to protect that. Okay, we have a universal motivation. Next, we need an inciting incident. We can hang out with our goal and motivation for a long time without ever doing anything about it. For example, I've been wanting to lose a few pounds for quite a few years, and yet every month goes by, and next month I'm starting that diet. So what's going to move us to solve our problems? Maybe it's stepping on a scale and going, ah! Maybe it's getting a note from our doctor. But we need something to move us into action. And that's something that's important as business folks as well, is what will cause our customers to change? What will cause our bosses to change? Where is that moment of opportunity to stick a wedge in and make Lisa's dreams come true? Next, we need struggles. If you don't remember anything else from this mini talk, remember struggles, because struggles get us interested. Struggles get us excited. We, as human beings, have been telling stories for over 250,000 years, which means that that's long enough that we are evolutionarily evolved to respond to stories. They are how we learn as a tribe. We tell stories, we receive the stories, and then we don't eat the dangerous red berries or play with the really big kitty with the big teeth. We learn from each other through stories. And struggle is where the information is passed on. So the more struggles, the more interesting it will be. For example, who here has not seen The Princess Bride? Okay, well, a few of you are going to get some spoilers, but it's a 20-year-old movie, so oops. One of my favorite characters, I like to think everybody's favorite character, is Inigo Montoya. Yes, you know this one. So he was orphaned as a child by the six-fingered man, and he has sworn revenge, so he has become the greatest swordsman in the world. And he's on a search for the six-fingered man for revenge, but he can't find him because the guy's moved on with his life. And so he's searching. The first time he meets the dread Pirate Roberts, he says, how many fingers you got? Only 5. That's the first struggle. He tries, he fails. He fights him, he's feeling depressed, he drinks a lot. His best friend, Andre the Giant, comes and says, hey, I found the six-fingered man. Yay! But he's locked up in an impenetrable castle. Boo. But I bet I know who can figure out how to get in. Dread Pirate Roberts. Yay! But he's dead. Boo. But he's only mostly dead. Yay! So they get a potion. He recovers. They get into the castle. My favorite part of the movie. Sorry, Mike. He is ready to finally face the six-fingered man. And the six-fingered man goes, eek, and runs away. Try, fail, struggles, chases him, fights him, huge sword fight. And what happens? We're ready for our release. Boom. Inigo Montoya is stabbed. He's dying. He's falling down. This is called the crisis. It's the black moment. It's the moment we believe that our hero will never get what they're dreaming of. And what does Inigo Montoya do? My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. He says the chant that gives him strength. He stands up. He fights. He beats a six-fingered man, which is our climax. And finally, he can move on with his life, which I believe involves piracy. But it's a resolution. It's a change. It's a story we all want to hear. We want to hear these stories of change. We want to believe that hope is possible. It's said that a lie can make its way 3 times around the world before when truth is still putting its pants on. There's an old Jewish story about story, which I love, and it's, of course, very relevant right now, which is truth, naked and cold and sad, went door to door in the village trying to find somebody to take her in, to take truth in. But nobody would. Everybody was afraid of truth. They would close the doors. And finally, understanding sees truth and takes her in, clothes her in story. And she goes back to the village, and the doors open. And with story, truth can be accepted in the village. And I believe if you can learn the pieces of story, the pieces of this wardrobe, and we can take our truths, our insights, our empathy, we can build a bridge to understanding. We can build a bridge to the truth. And in these times where we have bombings in synagogues, where gay nightclubs are bombed, where the truth is being kicked in the ass almost every day by our administration, sorry, political, it's time for us to stop fighting with facts and start fighting a little bit more with story. It's time for us as designers to learn how to do story. So today I'm going to take all this amazing knowledge and I'm going to try to craft a few stories that you can take home to your businesses, maybe even to your family and friends, so that you have the tools you need to change the world. Thank you. I wish I could give my 10 minutes to those folks because I can't imagine a more important topic for us to be thinking about right now. So there's a book I've been reading for 30 years, on and off, the way, say, a Southern Baptist might read the Bible. It's 101 Zen stories. I picked it up, well, I stole it from a roommate in college, and I've never stopped reading it. And it opens with the first story, which is about a professor who goes to a monk to learn about Zen. And he sits down, and the monk, of course, offers him some tea and puts out the cup and starts pouring the tea and keeps pouring and keeps pouring. And the tea flows over onto the table and onto the ground. And the professor says, stop, stop. The cup is full. It cannot take any more. And the Zen monk says, just like this cup, you are so full of your own opinions and ideas about Zen that I can't teach you anything. And first you must empty your cup. Now this is the problem with stories, is we are full of stories about what can and cannot happen, what is and is not possible. So my mentor, Dave Shen at Yahoo, he told me he was employee number 26, and it was the early days of the web, and they weren't sure what they could do with it. So the designers would go off, and they would do these things called turbos. It was a long time ago. And they would try to invent something that technology hadn't caught up with. And something crazy would happen, because they would show their designs to the engineers, and if the engineers thought it was cool enough, they would find a way to build it. And one of the things I've learned about design is design has a superpower. We can make ideas so tangible that they become real. And once these designers emptied their cup about what could and could not be built, they started to invent new things. And that's where the very first My Yahoo came from, the first personalized page. Now, we have lots of stories in our everyday life as well, about people of color, about women, about men, about product managers, about engineers. We have a lot of stories about people. And I want to tell you, just like Hamilton came into the life of one man who made a musical, there was a book that I just read on a flight, picking up at the last minute. It was called The Black Count. It was about the very first Alexander Dumas. Not Alexander Dumas, who wrote The Count of Monte Cristo, not his son, the playwright, but this man who was the son of a wastrel nobleman. So there was a French noble. He got in trouble with his family. His family shipped him off to his younger brother in Saint Domingo in the French Caribbean to try to straighten him out. That didn't really take, and he ran off with some slaves to a free village in the country. And then after his father died, he reappeared. He had 5 children. He sold 4 of them. They were half black. But one he merely pawned off to a ship captain to get his passage to France. And when he got an inheritance, he bought his son back. He loved this son so much that he spent all his money buying him fancy clothes, getting him sword lessons. And then something happened that emptied France's cup, the revolution. Suddenly, liberty, brothership, equality mattered to everybody. And the revolution got rid of slavery and said nobody, no matter what color of their skin, could succeed. And this young man who'd studied sword fighting changed his name from his nobleman, his rotten father, who had paid him. So I don't know, it's complicated when your dad is paying for your sword lessons and also pawning you to ship's captains. I imagine that was a complicated relationship. But he changed his name to Alexander Dumas, his mother's name, and enrolled in the army and went on to be a general. He led armies all over the world. He was a great fighter. He was a hero. Women loved him. Men wanted to be him. And he was an extraordinary man. And at one point when he was in Egypt on campaign, he found this huge treasure trove full of gold, and he turned it in kindly to Napoleon because he was too honest and too good a man to do otherwise. And then the cup filled again. Napoleon came into power. Napoleon was a racist, and he reinstated slavery. And he refused to pay the pension of General Dumas, who went back to his village to live with his wife and his small son in horrible poverty. And I think that the thing about stories is they can be our friends and they can be our enemies. And sometimes we have to figure out when to keep them, and sometimes we have to figure out when to ditch them and when to get rid of them. So I ask you today, think about your cup and what it's full of, and ask yourself, when should you empty it to create a new future and to design a world worth living in? Thank you. So when Richard reached out to me and asked me to do this new thing, to be the storyteller of the conference, I thought it was a little bit crazy and a little bit weird, and I am making these up. But my friend Brad just reminded me that I once gave him some advice, which is if anybody asks you to do something that make your knees shake, you should always say yes. And here we are together. We're all doing things that make our knees shake a little bit. And now, as the day comes to a little bit of an end, I want to try to tell the story of leading user experience, which I think is the title of these talks. So once upon a time, there was a designer. And according to Lisa, this designer was an optimist. And according to Miles, was an idealist, right? And you remember this designer, that was us a few years back, right? Loving craft, I want things to be better. I have all these great skills I learned in art school or possibly from a book, if you started long ago, which I suspect a lot of you did, or maybe on the web, one pixel GIFs. But I want things to be better, I can see it. Where's my time machine, right? And we started making wonderful objects and wonderful products. We were proud and full of ourselves. And then, as in every hero's journey, there was a call to adventure. And in this case, it came for me from Jeff Weiner at Yahoo. And I was an interaction designer there working for Search. They had just reorged, like you like to do, and put 80 designers into a group, and Jeff asked me to lead that group. And I was like, oh, hell no, Jeff, I can't do that. I've never done anything like that. That's horrible. What? And he said, I believe you can do it. Therefore, you can do it. We're done talking. This is Jeff Weiner. He went on to be CEO of LinkedIn and took it on IPO, so don't mess with Jeff. But some of us really need somebody to actually believe in us, right? Sometimes that's the kick in our bum that gets us out the door, you know? Every Frodo needs his Gandalf, I guess. And what I really struggled with was, am I still a designer? Right? I'm managing people. Am I still a designer? And finally, I thought, you know what? I'm going to design a place where design can happen. And that was the first step of thinking of design as a way, as a path, as a practice. And I think you guys know the word we're all thinking of. Is that design thinking? Design thinking is a term that I've been uncomfortable with for a long time, and yet we've seen story after story after story of people thinking like designers to solve really complicated problems. So when I wanted to do a class at Stanford, I told them I wanted to call it the Creative Founder, and it was a design approach to entrepreneurship. And they rewrote the description and said design thinking for entrepreneurship, because Stanford is DTTM. As you know, the design school, they're very passionate about the design thinking. And so I decided I either had to fight them or make my peace with it. And luckily, my friend Carl Fast, I said, hey, Carl, he's a professor at Kent State. He spoke at UX Week talking about distributed cognition. And I said, do you think this design thinking is actually a kind of cognition? Is it a kind of thinking? And he said, why, yes, because he's a professor. They all talk like this. Why, yes, it is a type of cognition. It's actually 3 kinds of cognition. So design thinking is distributed cognition, right? How do we think? We think with our hands. We think with Post-it notes. We think with walls. We think with pencils. We distribute our brain all over our desks, onto the walls until our PMs yell at us. We think with the world. It's part of our superpower. Second kind of cognition is expertise thinking. I was like, well, what's that? He said, well, think of a chef, right? You know, when you first learn to hold a knife properly, you're like, can I put my finger back on? But after a while, you're doing everything with the knife. You make the knife into a transparent instrument. You make mise en place. You understand how to work with fire. There's a point where we know our materials so much that they become an extension of us. So part of design thinking is a lot of quality time with Post-it notes, okay? And the last one's my favorite part. It's world modeling. We are amazing at making sense of the world. We take complex systems, we make mind maps, we make mental models, we make system models, we make concept models. If there's a model out there, we can make it, and then we model a better one. We model new worlds, and we show them to people, and people believe in them. And this is exciting stuff. So I was invited to do this for a company named Storium, which I was advising. And the CEO said, Christina, can you help me figure out pricing? And there was a time when I was younger that I'd be like, don't you need an MBA for that? But because of my fine hubris and my curiosity and my design thinking, I said, let's make a go of it. And instead of doing what anybody else would do, I went out and talked to the users. And I did tons of conversations with them in which I asked them, well, why did you sign up? Why did you fund the Kickstarter? What else do you use? I got to the value. I got to the pricing. And we moved from a pricing model that was feature-driven, because every time we talked to them about what feature they'd pay for, they're like, well, you have a crap site. There's no features, actually. It barely works. But what they loved was the community. They loved the community. They loved telling stories with each other. It was a community storytelling platform. And then we moved to a PBS model, where they got to choose how much they would give. And they actually gave more money than they originally would have, the price we set. And so because of talking to them, because of the co-creation, because we actually understood what they wanted, we were able to use design thinking to come up with a better pricing model. So that's a story of me saying, I'm a designer, I'll fix you. But sometimes we have to go the other way around. So Angel talked about metrics a lot. And this is something I've always struggled with my students. They're always like, oh God, we were told there'd be no math if we went to art school. And the reality is that sometimes we have to move out of our comfort zone. And I ran into Angel backstage, and I said, thank you for emphasizing metrics. And she said one of the things she found out was that if you learn a little bit and you challenge people, a lot of those product managers and engineers don't actually fully understand how A/B testing or multivariate testing works either. And so you don't want to assume too much expertise. You want to get enough knowledge to start having conversations. You want enough knowledge to be a peer and actually work on the real problems. And that was a pretty exciting idea. I remember when I had just finally fought to get my own budget at Yahoo, and then I had to figure out the math, and I worked for hours trying to figure out where the money was going to go, and I color-coded it so it would be really clear that every single one of my ideas would be perfect. And I brought it to Andrew, who was our group's CFO, and he looked at it and went, I'm colorblind. And that was a pretty good lesson that, you know what, the people we work with are our users also. We have to understand them. We have to understand their needs. It's a 360 thing. So we have to design our cultures. Janaki did this wonderful thing of changing culture fit to culture add. That was a design change. That was a design insight. As well, we need to think about team design. Miles talked a lot about trying to figure out the way out of the matrix. I've worked in terrible matrixed organizations that were so confusing that I decided I would just treat everybody like they were my boss and reported to me, which actually works pretty well because most employees won't do what you tell them to do. If you just tell them, you have to kind of seduce them in. And a lot of your bosses need clarity of what you need from them, so that was a pretty good solution. But as I've gone along, I've started questioning, why are our teams the way they are? And I found a wonderful book that said we have to think about the goals, the roles, and the norms. Goals are fairly easy. I'm going to talk about them a little more tomorrow in my workshop on OKRs. We need to set them. We need to pick only a few. Thank you, Catherine, for saying we need a little focus in this world. Fewer goals means more goals achieved. Roles. We have to think about the literal goals, I am the designer, but you know there's all these sneaky other roles, like who's the facilitator, who has the final say, who's gonna get coffee? And if we don't actively design those roles, guess what happens? The tall white guy makes the decisions and the woman gets the coffee. So we need to actively design the team we wanna have. We wanna actively design the norms. And then norms are kind of cool, like everybody has an idea of how it's going to work, but I learned this amazing technique from a guy who does Obama volunteer education, and I brought it to my class, and it's very simple. I use it now with teams when they first form, and I say, do you remember the best class you've ever been in? Remember the best team you were ever part of? What made it awesome? Remember the worst one? What made it suck? Now let's make some rules for how we want to be. And with my students, they came up to me, and these are college-age kids, you know, they're 20, 21, and they said, nobody ever asked me what I wanted out of my learning. And you know what, I bet there's a lot of employees out there, if you do this, they're gonna say, nobody ever asked me what I thought a team should be. And in this time where we have low context and high context cultures, polite people from Japan, I guess is the great stereotype, and rude people from Holland, trying to build a new future, figuring out how we're going to talk to each other is something worth designing, actively designing. So to finish, I want to tell a Richard Saul Wurman story, because I love telling Richard Saul Wurman stories. I was at the IA Summit, and God bless him, he was hanging out for the whole summit. And he was holding court out in the hall. You know, everybody pulled their chair around while he talked. And I waited to get my word in. I was like, hey, Mr. Wurman, you invented TED. I like to put on conferences sometimes. Could you give me any advice on how to put on a great conference? And he said, no. No, because you would have to follow me around for weeks. He said, I design the furniture. I have the music composed. I hire the chef. I design the menu. And I thought, this is a guy who never in his entire life took the package deal. This is a guy who never agreed to the choice of chicken breast or salmon. And this is a guy who made the best conference possibly ever. So as we sit back and think about what are we going to make great, at least we know we should never take the package deal. Thank you. I think I solved the lighting problem. I just needed a good brim. Well, folks, here we are. So I'd like to tell you a Mark Pincus story. Mark is the CEO, on and off, of Zynga. And I was working there in the early days. And I was in a meeting with another product manager. And this product manager tried the old triangle trick, you know? Would you like it fast, good, or cheap? And Mark said, I don't really like the word or. I like the word and. And while it drove me crazy at the time, I've come to think that there is something called and thinking. We had design thinking, right? Let's try on and thinking. At Zynga, we had a lot of and thinking. For example, we had a playbook. Every time somebody figured something out, about how we could make money, make games better. We'd put it on this wiki, and it was this amazing wiki full of knowledge. And then one day there was an executive who was angered, and they anonymously gave it to TechCrunch. And Mark lost it. He was furious, all his proprietary secrets going away. And of course, the wiki came down immediately. And if he was an or thinker, he'd be like, we can never share our knowledge again. It could get out and we could be crushed. But Mark instead decided he would change the organization. He had everybody go to these lunch and learns, the product managers, and hard data would be shared, but then the deck would go out with no numbers. Everybody had to work in another studio for a month when you were first hired, and then eventually you could go back to your own studio. Anybody could switch studios whenever they wanted. It was understood, because all that mattered was that everybody knew what everybody else knew. And what do you know? The wiki nobody looked at, but having all the knowledge in people's heads, shared by social information, that worked. He also was a control freak, God bless him. However, his company had to scale, and he had a problem. How do I keep control and yet have lots and lots of people? And he came up from John Doerr to use OKRs, objectives and key results, which allow you to set the end result, but then trust people to make that happen. And he was able to find a way to make the company grow like a maniac. And if you ever want to know why perhaps it was an upward and a downward, I have some theories on that too, which I will share off camera with drinks. But Angel was an and thinker too, right? Quant and qual. Can we design with user insights and hard data? Why not and? Let's be and thinkers. Could we even have and teams? So Peter said, who owns the user experience? Maybe not exactly like that. Is it product management or design? You know what? I like the word and. I remember when I was a full of myself punk at Yahoo, I just had my first book out on information architecture. I read Jared Spool, I read Jacob Nielsen, I knew everything. I was amazing. Isn't it amazing how smart you are when you're younger? And so this product manager, we were doing image search, and he's like, can you please put it here, because that's what Google does. And I was like, well, Jared Spool says this, and Jacob Nielsen in this, and the eye tracking says this. And he goes, Christina, could we just try it? And I suddenly realized that I was being cruel to my coworker. I can be an expert, and I can be compassionate, and I can listen to other people, and I can experiment. It's funny how hard compassion comes when you're busy being proud. For example, can you be honest and compassionate? When I first started at Zynga, everybody told me the same thing. You're going to have to fire this one product manager. Oh, you're going to have to fire her. She's dreadful. He's going to have to go. I'm protecting the identity as best I can. You're going to have to get rid of her. And so what I did is I did a classic 360. I got all the information about what was going wrong. And I sat down with this product manager, and I just quietly said, OK, this is what I'm hearing. Does that match your experience? And he looked at me and went, nobody ever said anything to me. Nobody told me. Sometimes being compassionate is being honest. And this product manager went on to be one of my best folks. Learned, changed, grew. And as well as being kind of angry at these other people for not having the guts to solve this problem, I learned that being compassionate and being kind and being honest and being direct were and qualities. So there's one theme that I'm seeing a lot throughout this conference. I want to call it and. So the double diamond has always bothered me a little bit, because like stories, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But does life have a beginning, a middle, and end? I think design is more like a diamond necklace, and every time we get to an end, another beginning starts. So I want to know what the rest of the story is. When I was a consultant back in the aughts, 2000, 1999, when we were partying, I was really going crazy because we would do these projects, and we'd dig in, and we work really hard, and we'd do lots of user research, and then we'd go back to the clients a few months after they launched, and it would be different. They change things. Why did they change things? Everything was perfect when we handed over the design documentation. And then we'd could we see some metrics? And they wouldn't give us any. They wouldn't even reply to our emails. because we were done. They were done with us. We were disposable. We weren't part of the team. We were just something to be plugged in. So I got a job at Yahoo, and I learned the rest of the story, which is a design can't just be designed. It has to be caretaken. It has to be adapted. It has to be grown. This is stuff you guys all know, right? Well, I'm going to refer back to Lisa again. Lin-Manuel Miranda, when he was asked by Variety what the hardest part about Hamilton was, he gave an answer I didn't really expect. He said, the hardest part is it's been so successful that I have like thousands of followers on Twitter and I can't tweet anymore because anything could become a scandal. And worse than that, there are all these kids who are going to the theaters and there's these huge crowds. And if we pop our head out the back door, the crowds will crush these kids. Everything we do has these massive, massive consequences. And I never thought about that when I was making it. And I'm glad it's successful. But now we have to figure out, how do we scale this thing? How do we make it safe? How do we make it wonderful for everybody? And I think that's what's happening to us in design right now. We fought for it. It's like, where's our place at the table? And now they're like, we got lots of seats at the table. Bring them in. Can you bring 100 of your closest friends? Where are all the designers? And so, John's now working on questions of design operations. The story is not over. The story keeps going for us, And I think and is an important way for us to be in the world. We're going to be hearing from some amazing people after me, and they're going to be looking at that old bugaboo work-life balance, right? Is that your favorite phrase ever? I gotta say, why are we balancing them? Because that sounds a little bit like or thinking to me. What if instead we pick the things we want and we demand them all to be in our life? I want meaning. So my workshop this morning heard a little bit of this story. When I left Zynga 3-4 years ago, I swore it would be my last corporate job ever. And I will say the uniform's much better now. I said, because I was taking Prilosec every single night, and then I'd wake up every 2 hours to take Tums. I was tired, I was worn out, I was angry, I was stressed. I lay on the floor for about 6 months and watched Food TV, and then I got up again, and I started wondering, okay, let me empty my cup. Let me get rid of all my preconceived notions. Let me refuse the package deal. What do I want my life to be? And I formed a hypothesis, like a good lean startup girl. Maybe I'd like teaching. And I did the smallest thing I could possibly do. I taught one night class at General Assembly. I like that. So I went full time and worked all day. Ooh, no, too much, too much. So then I started teaching part-time at CCA to get a little quality kids and health insurance and all those fine things in life. But I started writing. And every so often I do speaking. And little bit by little bit, I designed a life worth living. Because I said, what do I want? And so now you guys are going to go back to your companies, and I want to ask you guys to think about, if you emptied your cup, got rid of the rules, the expectations, refused the package deal, what would you design? What do you want? What would happen if you stopped saying or, and you started saying and? And I thank you.